I would now like to welcome our last speaker of the event, and thank you so much to everyone for having stayed with us. I know it's a lot of information to take in, and especially for those that are online, thank you for holding on. I hope you've been inspired and made to think, as I shared at the very beginning. So welcome to our final speaker, Vanessa. Vanessa's PhD project is both at the University of Marseille, I hope the pronunciation is okay, and also Tübingen. And she's addressing the question as to whether ecological emotions show a cultural conflict. She comes from also a very manifold background, having studied philosophy, Romance studies, and economic psychology. So I really look forward to Vanessa. Welcome to the space, and please, this space is yours.
Thank you, Vivi. Thank you, all the organizers for having invited me and for organizing this very important event. I think I hope I'm not going to be too repetitive with what already has been presented, but it's really important to keep exchanging on this this topic. And so I'm going to share my screen because I have some slides, not too many. And yes, so as Barack Obama once said, there's one issue that will define the contours of this century more dramatically than any other, and that is the urgent threat of climate change. And as we have been discussing since this morning, this threat is deeply touching emotionally. And well, the question I asked to Panu, how he sees emotions, I am deeply aware of this very difficult and widespread field of emotion theory. I just picked one that's my my solution for dealing with this problem. And so I see emotion with Vinciane Després as a negotiation and wisdom of living of our relationship with ourselves, the world, and others. And the message I would like to convey today is that eco-anxiety in this perspective can be seen as a narrative interaction with the individualist ideal of our Western societies. Since I do not give another definition of eco-anxiety here, I will focus on in my first part of the talk on this interactive negotiating relationship with the world and others, and the question, what relationship are we offered when growing up in the so-called Western societies? And in the second part, I would like to present relationality as an alternative narrative. So I first have to say, as Vivi already said in the very beginning, that I'm a German researcher. I am working in Germany and in France. I have never been to countries of the global south that would present me with a completely different social discourse. And so when I talk about relationality, it's from a theoretical perspective and with the idea of questioning Western narratives of sparking wonder about what our societies present us with. So with this in mind, let's dive in. What are ecological emotions negotiating? So as I said, Vinciane Després is who I'm basing myself on. She investigated the impact of the common definition of emotion as giving access to the authentic human self that is often taken for granted in psychological research. And as a result of her work, she revealed that there is an interaction going on between this theory, the researcher himself, and the participants of the research. And emotion cannot be seen as independent from the social environment and a psychological experiment as also being a social environment. So consequently, she defines emotion, as I already said, as a negotiation and a wisdom of living with our relationship with ourselves, with the world, and with others. And when I speak of ecological emotions, I therefore do not only address them as a reaction to climate change and environmental disruption, but as a narrative interaction with ourselves and also with others and the more than human world. As Martin Heidegger said, the others are always already there. And as a result, they have already shaped the world. And this world, at least where I grew up, focuses on individualism. In investigating the rise of depression, Alain Ehrenberg points to what he calls a general autonomy condition of the capable individual. So what he's saying is that even though there are nation states that presumably take over some responsibility for safeguarding their citizens, there is this discourse of in our societies that an individual should be autonomous and should keep searching for a sense in life and for individually taking responsibility for one's life. So with regards to the climate crisis, the nation states are absolutely lacking action in mitigating the crisis. And this paper by Hickman and colleagues that I think Panu Pihkala also referred to and has been working on with them is showing that this lack of action by political leaders leaves young people with the impression of being betrayed. And when confronted with climate change and environmental disruption, it's a very difficult position to be in when to be called autonomous and to be called individually responsible. So when talking about eco-anxiety as an emotion, the question raises, what wisdom of living is this emotion offering? And I want to stress again the point that to me, emotions are not just reactions, they are interactions with our environment. As such, the wisdom, this wisdom of living is coming from finding ways to deal with ourselves, with other humans, and the more than human world. So interacting with this narrative of the competent and autonomous individual has three important consequences that influence the feeling of eco-anxiety. And these are, as I listed on the slide, a feeling of loneliness, a feeling of responsibility, and a feeling of powerlessness or helplessness. So, as I said, this work by Hickman and colleagues reports that those who are affected by climate emotions often have a feeling that policymakers leave the population alone with the problem of climate change. And individualism as a social ideal cannot answer this feeling. For what is more, and we already heard about Kari Norgaard's work, she showed that people fear to become outsiders in their social environments, which would make them even more alone, and therefore they do not change their behavior because they want to be integrated in their environments. So this, as a result, is leading to this feeling of loneliness. People feel they should do something, they fear exclusion, and therefore, as Marlies was saying before, sometimes they get just blocked. And related to this is this feeling of responsibility. And Thomas Doherty, he reports that, I quote, "I have counseled many people experiencing varying crises of meaning and responsibility about climate change. A scientist who has sailed the Pacific garbage patch, distressed by neighbors' consumer habits, an environmental engineer who has run the numbers and doesn't see a way to effectively address carbon emissions, a ranger in Glacier National Park trying to remain positive while educating visitors about these receding landmarks, and a person is shocked by a news story about the dire consequences of rising ocean temperatures. So we're again with this discourse of collapse, which is deeply affecting people who are prone to climate anxiety. So these people feel responsible. Either this feeling can be of one of guilt for living in a society that pollutes. That's something Karin Norgaard also revealed in her research. And then they will more often not change their behavior because it's a societal problem, and if society doesn't change, why should I? Something like that. And then on the other side, there can be a feeling of responsibility, making them turn towards engagement in activism. This has been shown by Pike in her work on activism, climate activism. So in the last consequences I was talking about of this narrative of individualism and the autonomy condition, it's also very much related with the other one, is the one of powerlessness and helplessness. And it is mostly experienced in regards to the immensity of this problem and the fact that, as stated before, the states don't reach agreement on action, and they don't really do something for mitigating the climate crisis. So activists often take over this responsibility by trying to convince politicians, by, just doing something by themselves, trying to convince lay people. And I think I do not need to point out how varying this also is for the climate activists. And even more so, as climate activists keep feeling that they are a minority and that they are outsiders of this main society. So all of this, the loneliness, the responsibility, and the helplessness, they add up to this fear of eco-anxiety. And wisely interacting with this, I would like now to move on to my second part and present relationality as an alternative narrative. In my view, this answers the consequences of individualism I just named, and thereby would help eco-anxiety. And this alternative is an indigenous and feminist concept. So I'm citing here Sean Wilson, who is an indigenous scholar. He's informing us that rather than viewing ourselves as being in relationship with others or other people or things, we are the relationships that we hold and we are part of. And so this includes not only other human beings, but also the environment or the land or even the whole cosmos or even ideas. In this logic, I now hold a relationship to Sean Wilson, because I am citing his ideas, and through his texts, I'm taking part in his thinking. So why should we need relationality? In a socially constructed worldview, such as the relational one, there is no such thing as loneliness. However, as Kata Mackenzie Knowles and colleagues remarked, neoliberal ideology, with its focus on the individualism, as I have been also stating before, and with the focus on exclusion, has suppressed these interconnected ways of being and knowing. And if we want to answer the feeling of loneliness, it seems wise to focus again on the relations. And I think I join also my the speaker before, Robert, who has been also stressing this. So when it comes to the feeling of responsibility, we have seen this connection with the feeling of guilt, of being part of a polluting society. Sarah Ray, who is working also together with Pihkala in the Existential Toolkits group, she sees an important influence of this feeling of guilt and responsibility when, for instance, the discourses focus on the CO2 footprints. Alternatively, she proposes to focus on joy that mainly comes from communal events and thereby helps us remember why we should act. Again, this has already been said. And deep psychologist Sally Gillespie recommends to reframe climate change as a systematic problem and not to focus on responsibility of individuals. I quote Gillespie, "No one person can save the planet or ourselves from climate catastrophes, unlike in the movies. It is important to keep this in mind when committing to climate action, both because the sense of urgency and pressure to act is high and because the archetype of the warrior hero is so dominant in contemporary cultures." So this is linked with the feeling of powerlessness because this narrative of the lonely hero that Gillespie is criticizing here, it is very much this responsibility of being autonomous, responsible for succeeding in life, and it can also affect the activists. So what Gillespie recommends is to find a group in which one can overcome the lonely hero and be part of climate action within the group. From my point of view, it can be questionable whether therapy should prescribe activism, but finding a group that shares the same values and thereby creating this feeling of interconnectedness can be of much help for eco-anxious people. Another possibility to re-establish relationality can be found in the work of Kada Mackenzie Knowles and colleagues. I already cited them. They work in an educational research context where they search the traces of animals and plants in the city and depict them by using different art techniques. That way, they try to experience relationality directly. I quote, "Meandering, moving slowly, visiting and staying with the traces through arts-based educational research methodologies and methods offers an exploration of diverse ways of becoming and ways of knowing that enable embodied, inseparable engagement with everything." End of quote. So I imagine, and Robert has given us a little bit of an impression also, that an eco-village is a perfect place to practice relationality. I have also seen on your website that you have many educational and research projects on that, and the two workshops that are coming up for you in presence also promote this interconnected experience through theater methods and other. So I come to an end. I have presented the idea that eco-anxiety can be seen as a narrative interaction with the individualist idea of our Western societies. And the consequences of this ideal that are closely related to the experience of eco-anxiety are feelings of loneliness, helplessness, and responsibility. And if we want to really address the causes of eco-anxiety, we have to tackle these narratives. And one possibility would be to replace them with a narrative of relationality. So I know that this is not an easy thing to do, but we can start small. And as this nice comic that Rosemary Moscow kindly allowed me to use illustrates, we all care about climate change. We can just start by talking with one another, as we do today. So thank you all for listening. And I also thank all the beings that are in relation to my work. And this is my bibliography. And now I'm looking forward to questions, comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vanessa, also for bringing in these other perspectives, for bringing in perspectives from Indigenous scholars, for bringing in different voices, which I think is so necessary, especially in academic work. So thank you for that. And again, for, I think, really nicely concluding also all that has been said today. And I feel like the sort of thread that has been running through many of the talks is really about moving from the individual state to the collective, and from not being or seeing ourselves as sort of individualist consumers, but direct participants also of what is happening both within us, others around us, and the more than human world, as you so nicely said. So I wonder if there are any questions here in the room from people, and otherwise in the chat. So there's a comment here from Maria. I would welcome your wisdom regarding what do you feel are the essential or most important skills, experiences, or qualities for facilitators holding space for eco-anxiety? Vanessa, if you have a direct response to that, it would be warmly appreciated. And otherwise, maybe this is also something for the other speakers to respond to.
I feel this would be something Panu is working with this existential toolkit group. This is something I can really recommend. I'm working with that in teaching, to hold a space for students to talk about eco-emotions. Well, start talking. That's I think something that's very important. Yeah, Vivi, thank you. And really opening up spaces for this. There are some others. There is I should search the links, but I can share that in the chat. But maybe the other ones want to respond also.
So I'm just responding to a question here in the room, which was what was the name of this? It's the existential toolkit. Yeah, I can also share it. Exactly, yeah. Are there any other questions? A question from myself is how do you see us changing this narrative or moving towards a narrative of perhaps greater relationality or collectivism in a society that is really so geared towards the individual, and perhaps this requires also a sort of systems change.
Yes, totally. So I think I see one of my tasks in talking about it and keep talking about it. I think we have heard from not only me about Pablo Savini, who is also trying to change this narrative. There are you can change it in a scientific context maybe more easily than in the broader context on the media. And I'm a bit shocked also by the fact that there is so much talk on the radio, for instance, about climate change, climate emotions, how to deal with that. And in the broad public, people don't seem to know about it or never got touched by it. And I cannot know, I cannot get to know why that is so, because on the radio, I would feel like it's already a broad public, but it seems not. So if anybody has a better answer to this, how to change the discourse, I would appreciate.
Thank you for responding. I'm just going to have a look at the chat again to see. So we have been given some links. Thank you so much, also Panu, for a link on a discussion of holding space in relation to climate emotions, which I can share with the participants who are here. And if there are no more questions, oh, we have a question here.
I have a question. Thank you, first of all, for your talk. I was wondering if you see any relation of the individual narrative and the capitalist system that we are living in.
I do. But well, I'm from a leftist point of view, I would agree with that. But that's my political perspective also. So, well, yes, I see a connection of focusing on individual responsibility. There is a paper by Price, I think is the name. This kind of liberal thinking of we are individuals individually responsible for our lives, for succeeding, for also finding a job, earning our ways, for succeeding our lives. That's, to me, something very much connected to a liberal thinking, and not so much to socialist thinking. So I see a connection there, and I think a capitalist society, well, there are, you can have a capitalist society in China, which is obviously, but still I see this way of gaining more for oneself, earning one's life, more connected to the individualist thinking as well. Yes.
Thank you for the response. Final round of questions, if there are any. No? In that case, I would like to close the event, at least the first part of this. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you to the speakers for sharing your insights. I hope that you have been given something to think about. I also just want to share again this very beautiful question that Vanessa, you mentioned at the very end. What wisdom of living is this emotion offering to us? So maybe that's a question for us to keep in mind as we begin to feel this vast array of eco-emotions.